This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Choosing a bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drink that's all flavor and just 100 calories? Easy. Choosing between creamy vanilla, double chocolate, and sea salt caramel flavors? A little harder. Try the delicious new Starbucks Frappuccino light drinks. Look for them wherever you buy groceries. Start with Starbucks coffee.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. I'm joined now by David Schoen. David Schoen is one of the most respected criminal defense lawyers in the country. He is a graduate of Columbia University Law School, where he got his Master of Laws. He's also got his Juris Doctor in the law and graduated cum laude from Boston College Law School. He was, of course, one of President Donald Trump's attorneys on the Senate floor during one of the two impeachments. To me, he is perhaps the best criminal defense lawyer in the country. But he's joining us because he had been retained by Jeffrey Epstein to fight the very serious charges against him. And David Schoen has written that he also is skeptical of the claim that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide while incarcerated. David Schoen, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Thanks very much. Always an honor to be with you.
So, David, in America, everybody's entitled to an attorney, and when you're facing serious charges, you need the best attorney you can find. One thing I have learned is that former federal prosecutors are not necessarily the best criminal defense attorneys. They're actually quite different. And as I understand this article I read in Newsweek, you were retained by Jeffrey Epstein prior to his untimely death to represent him. Why don't you kind of take it from there?
Sure. I'll give you a little bit of background. About many years earlier, when Jeffrey Epstein went to jail, he called me through a contact with a mutual friend because he wasn't so happy with his lawyers, and he just wanted to get some information about what to expect in jail and that sort of thing. From that point forward, maybe 10, 12 years earlier, before his death, we kept in touch maybe once a year. He would ask me a question or two. But in the year before he died, he was in regular contact with me, and that was because a case was being sort of re-energized against him. The so-called victims in his case in Florida, women involved, tried to reopen the criminal case against him, saying that they hadn't gotten proper notice that's required for victims in a federal criminal case. And so he had a team of lawyers, very fine, well-known lawyers, a big group of them, very expensive, and but he just wasn't so happy with them. So he was asking me during that time period to review their work in the case just behind the scenes. They didn't know I existed, and he and I just communicated about it. Skipping forward, when he, at some point, maybe in March or April of 2019, he asked me to come to meet him at his home in New York. And I've never met him in person before, actually, but just talked to him on the phone and in emails. And he asked me at that time if I would take over all of his litigation. So I didn't feel like I could. I didn't feel I could handle all of that. I had a heavy caseload at the time. But I said I'd certainly be available for consulting. July, he got arrested, and I began, the night he was arrested, I got a call asking whether I could go see him the next day. I said, look, he's got a big team of lawyers he's had for many years, well-known people. I don't think he needs me to come see him, and I'd feel awkward kind of in that group anyway. They would wonder why I was there all of a sudden. They didn't know I'd been advising him behind the scenes. So anyway, I didn't go, and one of those lawyers, a guy named Marty Weinberg, said he could get a local lawyer to go see him in the jail, and he did so. From that point forward, there was quite a competition to see, who could represent him. He had Marty Weinberg and another guy, Reed Weingarten, who were two of the longtime attorneys representing him, and they appeared actually in his bail hearing and so on. But his in-house counsel continued to call me over the next couple of weeks to ask if I could come see him. And finally he said to me that, and I was very proud of this, frankly, that Jeffrey Epstein, that I was the only person in the world Jeffrey Epstein trusted with his life to represent him in a court of law. I took that as a great responsibility. I never saw him as the monster he's painted out to be. And so that kind of convinced me to go see him. And so I went to see him on August 1st. This was shortly after the news that appeared that there was some thought that he had tried to commit suicide, a couple weeks before he died. So when I got there, I found a couple lawyers meeting with him already, and I sat in on that meeting. He asked me to, and that was unrelated to his case. It was more related to business dealings. They left, and then the jail psychiatrist or psychologist came in, and this was part of their protocol because he'd been on suicide watch given the incident earlier. So she met with him for maybe half hour, something like that. They were laughing, smiling, and so on. And then she left, and I came in and sat with him. We discussed the earlier incident. He explained it was not a suicide attempt. It was a sort of gag, very poor taste gag that his cellmate had pulled on him by putting some kind of sheets around his neck and then pulling them, leaving a mark on his neck and so on. The cellmate was a huge guy, was alleged to be a hitman for Mexican mafia, former policeman, had absolutely no business putting them in a cell with him. In any event, the purpose of my meeting on August 1st was to discuss with him whether I would go forward. We had a long discussion. We met for about 5 hours, and he asked me if I would take over the defense of his case. I said, look, you've got these lawyers in the case already who think they're representing you. He'd had others come to see him. He had a guy, I'll leave out names, I suppose, but people trying very hard to take on his case. And when he would say, I really want to hire David Schoen, they would find something to, malign me with or something. It's very competitive, very nasty sort of meetings, that sort of thing. And he sent them all packing. Anyway, we came to an agreement on representing him, but I said I wanted to meet with his lawyers, especially Weinberg and Weingarten, beforehand. He said, that's fine, but they'll certainly, step aside and let you lead the case. I said, I doubt it. They've never heard of me. They don't know me. And they're locked into this case. And it's a high-profile case. In any event, I tried to set up a meeting with them at the MCC, the detention facility where he was being held, because I wanted them to hear from him, not from me, that he wanted me to take over the case. So one of them was in London at the time, but in any event, they wouldn't meet at the MCC. They wanted to meet Mr. Weingarten's office on a Friday. Friday is not a good day for me, so I asked if we could meet the next week, and everybody said that would be fine. His in-house counsel said it would be fine. And then, Jeffrey asked if he could meet with me anyway on Thursday. The in-house counsel said it's not really necessary. It's not an emergency. Just come up next week. And so that, of course, was the Thursday and the Friday just before he died. He died on August 10th. I regretted very much that I hadn't gone up to see him. But what I can tell you is this. If I'm talking too much, you'll tell me. But what I can tell you is this. When I saw him on August 1st, 9 days before he died, he made a deal to hire me to take over his case. That doesn't sound like someone for a great deal of money. That doesn't sound like someone who's contemplating suicide. In the next days, I got calls from local counsel who had been representing him in some, minor capacity, telling me how excited and animated he was from our meeting. He wanted to fight the case. One of them called and asked me if I could take over his bail appeal immediately. I said I wouldn't. I didn't think they'd made a good record in the case, and I didn't want to just jump into something. I got calls from his in-house counsel. I got paid. I got, some degree. And he had given me a task, quite frankly, that related to his financial affairs. It had nothing to do with the criminal case, really, except that, he had been blacklisted by a number of banks by that time, so he needed to find some alternative banking opportunities. And that's what he had met with the other lawyers for when I came into the cell with him, into the meeting room with him. In any event, so I went forward with that. That's only a forward-looking thing. That's not someone contemplating suicide. And finally, on Friday, I am told that he was giving out orders to the lawyers consistent with the direction of the defense that he and I had mapped out during that 5 hours. I had made plans to move up to New York, 4 days a week to work on the case, but still subject to meeting with those lawyers to find out, whether they would step aside. I had an alternative team lined up already to cover every aspect of the case, the legal issues and help prepare for trial and so on. So that's anecdotally why I say I don't believe it was suicide. I don't have a conspiracy theory. But maybe the more important reason is the next day, the following Monday or so, there was going to be a medical examination by the city medical examiner. I insisted that the top medical examiner in the world, Michael Baden, participate in it. It turns out that the family had already arranged for that. So Michael Baden sat in on the autopsy, the medical examination, and his reaction to it was, there's absolutely no way this could be called suicide. He's done thousands and thousands of autopsies. He's never seen injuries like this consistent with a suicide. And he said the medical examiner couldn't say it was suicide. And so, he said afterwards, he was shocked to read the finding of suicide by the medical examiner just days later with no additional evidence.
Chronic spontaneous urticaria, or chronic hives with no known cause. It's so unpredictable. It's like playing pinball. Itchy red bumps start on my arm, then my back, sometimes my legs. Hives come out of nowhere, and it comes and goes. But I just found out about a treatment option at treatmyhives.com. Take that, chronic hives. Learn more at treatmyhives.com.
16 years from today, Greg Gerstner will finally land the perfect cannonball. Epic splash. Unsuspecting friends. A work of art only possible because Greg is already meeting all these same people at AARP volunteer and community events that keep him active and involved and help make sure his happiness lives as long as he does. That's why the younger you are, the more you need AARP. Learn more at aarp.org/local.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve. It's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
David, let me cut you off there because we got to go to a break. I obviously do not take a benign view of Mr. Epstein, having written a book largely on the subject. But our function here is to talk mostly about whether he committed suicide. And, of course, everyone is entitled to a lawyer. And we're talking to criminal defense attorney David Schoen, who had been retained by Jeffrey Epstein in the days just prior to his untimely death. When I wrote the book, The Clinton's War on Women, I interviewed the police chief of Palm Beach, who told me that after an extensive undercover investigation, he had turned over to the state's attorney in Palm Beach County an airtight case including 33 underage victims for child sex trafficking as well as statutory rape. Therefore, the chief was shocked when the state's attorney ended up charging Epstein with 1 count of solicitation. After he complained to the prosecutor, that was bumped up to 1 count of solicitation of a minor, still paling in comparison to the charges that could have, and I believe should have, been brought. So the police chief went to the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida, then Alex Acosta, to tell him that he believed that the county prosecutor had either been threatened or bribed, but that he did not believe that the charges were just. Alex Acosta, the U.S. attorney, then conducted his own investigation, whereupon he rubber-stamped the state charge and he sealed the case. It was only after a heroic 3-year battle by the Palm Beach Post that the case against Epstein on state sex crime charges were unsealed. Now, Acosta would subsequently be appointed by President Donald Trump as Secretary of Labor. And in the preparation for his confirmation hearings, one lawyer who I know personally, who worked to prepare him for those hearings, asked him point blank what he would say if some senator asked him why he had rubber-stamped the state charges, but more precisely, why he had sealed them. And Acosta said, well, if I'm asked that, I will tell the truth, which is I was told by the CIA that he was working for them and that I was to seal the case. I believe strongly that Jeffrey Epstein was working for various intelligence agencies. I think he was a blackmailer for hire. And I do think that his remaining victims who are still with us need justice. Is there a list? David, I don't think there's a list per se. In my 2015 book, I had the Lolita Express Manifest, which was published initially by Nick Bryan, great investigative reporter. I also had his so-called Little Black Book. I don't believe everyone in his book of contacts was guilty of a sex crime, but I continue to wonder about the hard drives and the CDCs that were taken from his safes in New York, in Paris, his ranch in New Mexico, as well as from the safe on his island. Where are those DVDs? Where are those hard drives? I recognize that they should not and could not be released because they're probably quite graphic, quite pornographic. And obviously the identity of his victims should be protected. But as for his clients, I still think they should be exposed. The central question of this discussion, however, because everyone's entitled to a lawyer, you mentioned that forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden said that the scene he found inside Epstein's cell and the markings on his body did not support the conclusion that Epstein hung himself with a sheet. Tell us a bit more about that.
That's correct, and he said it on many occasions. He also spoke quite graphically about the markings on his neck. But, you know, the thing with the cell is the whole setup there and their claim of suicide just didn't look practically like it could have been accomplished. In other words, there was a relatively low ceiling. I got calls from people on the cell block where he was telling me that it would have been impossible given the setup that they said he did. You know, there's not a high enough ceiling to fall from, jump from, that sort of thing. But mainly it was the markings on his body that I think led Dr. Baden to his conclusions. And by the way, I mean, he said, you know, he didn't come to a firm conclusion, but neither, he said, could the medical examiner reasonably have come to a conclusion, especially since she didn't at the time, the assistant medical examiner did an autopsy with him. At the time, she could not come up with a conclusive finding for many reasons he had said, and then came to a conclusive finding that it was suicide without any additional evidence. And, you know, that seemed to be the popular line of explanation that emanated from then. And he doesn't buy it, and I put a great deal of stock into his findings. But as I say also, anecdotally, it doesn't make any sense that the day before, that is Friday, he was dead on Saturday, August 10th. On Friday, August 9th, he's giving instructions on following the steps that he and I discussed and going forward to defend his case aggressively in court.
Yeah, I'm particularly bothered by the suspicious suicide of his most prominent victim. I mean, 6 years after his death, began to become clear that none of his clients were going to be held accountable. The most prominent victim and whistleblower, Virginia Giuffre, died of a reported suicide. Now, I read every word of her testimony, every word of her depositions, and I also am familiar with the fact that she said publicly, I am making it publicly known that in no shape or form am I suicidal. I have made this known to my therapist and to my physician. If anything happens to me, in the sake of my family, do not let this go away and help me to protect them. There are too many evil people who would like to see me quieted. Her father, interviewed by Piers Morgan, says he does not believe it. He says, I started crying away. I'm still crying. I cannot believe that this is happening. It's impossible. And then for them to now say that she's committed suicide, there is no way she did that. Somebody got to her. So I must tell you, having read every word of her testimony, having her attorney was very cooperative in the preparation of my book, I must respectfully disagree with the FBI director and the deputy director. I recognize that we're all interested in the truth, but there are too many anomalies here, too many unanswered questions, and I agree with you, David, that the report of Michael Baden, perhaps the if not the most respected forensic pathologist in the country, certainly among them, gives credence to the idea that no, Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. David Schoen, I appreciate your joining us on this Memorial Day weekend. Thank you for tuning in to The Roger Stone Show, and we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.